Hey YouTube, welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be replacing the factory Electronic Boost Control Solenoid, or Wastegate solenoid, on my 2019 Hyundai Elantra GT N-Line. Now I'm going to be replacing my factory unit with a Pierburg solenoid, which is, I believe, the solenoids that are used on a lot of the German cars like the Volkswagens and Audis, and it's generally just considered to be of better quality. And this upgrade is considered by many to kind of be a must-do, maybe even one of the first modifications that you make to your 1.6T Hyundai or Kia vehicle. And the reason for that is the factory unit, at least in my experience, just doesn't deliver very smooth boost. I've noticed sort of a surging effect when under hard acceleration. So as I understand it, by upgrading to the Pierburg unit, that's going to smooth out the boost delivery and in general just be sort of a quality of life improvement for the way the car feels. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and kind of get into this and take you guys along for the ride. So this is what the boost control solenoid looks like. No matter who you order from, if you're ordering a Pierburg, it's pretty much just going to be the Pierburg solenoid, and then depending on who you get it from, you're going to get a slightly different mounting bracket. So I ordered from N75. The bracket's honestly pretty shoddy. I'm going to go ahead and replace the bolts and nuts. I have no idea. I hope this is an aluminum piece of metal here, but I have no idea. So I may actually end up just having a bracket custom made. It won't really be that expensive, but I'm for sure going to replace these nuts and bolts because, let's see if I can get it to show up on the camera here, but he more or less just put the nut on and then used a cutoff wheel to cut the excess bolt off. And honestly, this will work just fine. This is more about function than form, and it's going to be in a spot where you're never going to see it. So I'm being really picky here. I just want to make sure you guys know this has nothing to do with how well this product is going to work on your car. I just happen to be picky about how things are. So I'm going to go ahead and take a couple extra steps at some point to improve the quality of the bracket here. But I'm sure that this is going to function just fine. I don't see why it wouldn't. And then, of course, just like with any kit, you're going to get the harness adapter. You're going to get two silicone vacuum lines. Now, I think with N75, I think he gives you the option to ship it with or without the replacement lines and the zip ties and all that. But from what I've seen, the factory hoses, they can be a little tricky to reuse. So in my opinion, you're better off just pulling the factory stuff off and then just replacing it, and then that way you're less likely to accidentally break off these nipples and that sort of thing. So but that's what it looks like, and we'll get this sucker in the car. All right, so if you can see it down in there, it's got like a tan connector. That's the general location of where the boost control solenoid is. There's different ways you can approach this. I've seen some people do it from the top. I feel like that would be a little difficult. I can see that it is possible. You can do it from underneath the car, which if you have a lift, that's probably the way I would go. But the other way you can get to it is through the side here. If you just remove the liner inside of here, you can get right at it. It's actually just right up in there. I'm already doing some suspension work. As you can see, my strut is not in the car right now. So I'm going to approach it from this side here. That way, I don't know, I'm not laying on the ground trying to do it from underneath the car. But I would say, just by looking at it and never having done it before, if you have access to a lift, I would just pull the skid plate off and do it from underneath. I think that it is possible to do it from the top if you don't feel like going through any of that ordeal. So you can try it that way, but I'm going to do the through the wheel well method. All right, so here's a good look at the OEM EBCS. You can see it's got one vacuum line that goes to the turbo, the other goes to the wastegate, and then you see that sort of tan colored connector, and then there's just one bolt that holds the bracket on. So essentially just pull it all out, disconnect the electrical connector, carefully pull the vacuum lines off of the turbo and the wastegate. You can see there's a check valve on that vacuum line there. Undo the bolt, pull the whole thing out, and be ready to install the new one. So this is what it looks like when you get the OEM Boost Control Solenoid out of there. Not gonna lie, it is a little bit of a pain. In theory, it's super easy. There's a 10mm bolt that comes out, and then you've got two vacuum lines. But anyone that's ever tried to remove any OEM vacuum lines knows that the first time they're on there pretty good. I don't know if they use something to kind of get them stuck on there, but either way, you're laying in an awkward spot. The line that goes to the wastegate, you can't really see. You can just reach up there and feel it, so you're kind of doing it by feel. I will say that if you have like one of these guys or one of these guys to help get the end of it started and kind of work around it, I feel like that kind of breaks it loose, and then you can kind of get a good grip on it. The nipples they go onto are fairly long, so just make sure you're not putting any stress on those because they're pretty small, obviously. But yeah, I don't know. This probably took me 10-15 minutes to get off, and a lot of it was just figuring out how the heck I needed to lay on the ground and reach up in there, because again, it's just kind of awkward positioning. But oh well, I will get the new one in there and then we'll go from there. All right, so I got my new solenoid prepped and ready to go in. As you can see, I went ahead and replaced the bolts on there. These are just some M5 socket cap screws, some washers and lock nuts, and then I went ahead and put the new hoses on. Obviously, once I get it in, I'll be able to judge the length that I'm going to need, and then have to cut it, but I'll cross that bridge once I get it in there. When it comes to connecting the new EBCS, the vacuum line that comes out underneath the electrical connector is the one that goes to your turbo, and then that line that's coming perpendicular off the top of the valve, that's the one that's going to go to your wastegate. Now, as you'll see in the next video clip, it was a bad idea for me to preemptively connect these vacuum lines, as it does make it a lot harder to get them connected. So don't do what I did, but I guess this is a good visual reference. All right, so here's the completed positioning of the new Pierburg EBCS. So what I ended up doing, I shouldn't have connected the vacuum lines to the valve to start with. That just made it harder. I went ahead and connected them to the wastegate and the turbo first, especially because getting your hand up where the wastegate is just difficult. So if the new solenoid's sitting there, it's just basically impossible to get your hand up in there. So I just connected those first, then sort of mounted the bracket in place, and then was able to cut, the silicone tubing you can just cut with scissors. It's not that big a deal to cut it in place. And then you want to make sure that the tubing has enough slack to where it makes nice natural bends. You don't want to be putting any stress on the tubing. So you're always better off, if you're trying to cut it to length, try to go a little longer, because you can always cut more off. But if you cut it too short, I'm trying to get the light down in here so you guys can see. But then I zip tied, if you can see, I zip tied the wiring harness to the bracket, just to take up any slack, make sure nothing was going to be flopping around. So I think we're going to be good. Next thing I need to do is just take it for a drive and give you guys my impressions on what it feels like. So it's been a few weeks since installing the Pierburg solenoid, and I've had a chance to drive the car around quite a bit, and I wanted to sort of give my thoughts on how it feels. So it's not a modification that's going to, knock your socks off. As I sort of stated in the beginning of the video, this is meant to be more of a quality of life improvement, for lack of a better term, and essentially just make the car feel better and smoother, and it certainly does that. I can't comment on whether or not there's any sort of, acceleration improvement as far as how fast the car is. Certainly feels a lot smoother, and the boost feels more consistent. I know that it's kind of hard to put it into words. You almost just have to sort of drive the car before and after making the change, but there is a reason that a lot of people do this upgrade, and then sort of rave about it afterwards. I can confirm through my own experience that I did also notice that improvement. So I would certainly recommend this, especially because it's not a very expensive modification. It's fairly easy to install. It's annoying, but it's not difficult. That's the best way I can put it. There's several different vendors that you can order a Pierburg solenoid from. I ordered mine from N75, so I'm going to go ahead and link that below in the description, but feel free to just order, from whichever vendor you feel most comfortable with. But aside from that, I don't really have much else to say. It feels better. That's pretty much the gist of it. So if you have any other questions or comments, feel free to leave them below, and I'll catch you guys in another video.